the emotion gets tied into, well, this is the home that I scrimped and saved for my kids and my family. I'm not going to let go of it. And what happens is that after they part ways and divorce, both their names are on that, and if the ex-spouse, gets in arrearages or, takes loans out against the property, the other ex-spouse could very well be liable for that.
Absolutely, and this is a time when you really want to lean on your attorney to draft any settlement documents or anything like that with a provision in there that if the name can't be removed, that an asset like a home would be sold. A lot of times what we can do with that is we can structure the settlement so that one party would get the house, but then remove the other person's name within a certain amount of time, and if that can't be done, then the house would be sold.
So, and then number 16, if you've got college-aged kids, you might want to work out the dependency deductions beforehand to ensure that you get your share of educational deductions or credits that, of course, are only available to those who can claim the dependency deduction.
Yeah, and that again goes back to a little bit to what we were talking about before with the dependency deductions and whether you might split those or alternate them or what have you.
Certainly. Number 17, when figuring the divorce settlement, be sure to factor in any tax issues that will come as a result. For example, one spouse might get $1 million in cash and the other might get $1 million in stock options. Cash settlement won't have any tax consequence, but it is likely the sale of stock options will down the road. The mere divvying up of property doesn't cause tax, but the type of asset that you have and when you sell it might trigger tax, and that should be factored in when considering your settlements.
Right, and I think that the way to do that would be, for example, using your example of $1 million in cash. If you've got one party getting the $1 million in cash and the other party getting the stock options shouldn't be valued in terms of your sort of balance sheet of who gets what at $1 million. They should be valued at $1 million less some sort of determination of tax. So just if you're using a 25% tax bracket, then assuming that there's going to be some amount of tax deducted from that to determine the actual value would be how I would normally handle something like that.
Well, certainly you would if it were to be 25%, you would add it to that.
Okay.
Right, so that that it is truly equitable. And in all these instances, you want to determine the basis in the assets before they're divvied up between the two parties, because the basis in the assets and what they get sold for, or what they're worth for for purposes of divvying up between the two spouses, we should be factoring in the tax consequences of those as well down the road.
Okay, number 18.
Okay, number 18. What if your soon-to-be ex-spouse is self-employed and not paying taxes, or they're susceptible to an audit, or you suspect that there may be some improprieties in their business? You might want to think twice about filing a joint return or continuing to do so, because you could wind up stuck with tax bills down the road after the divorce is final.
Right, and another issue with a self-employed person is they often have income beyond what they claim. So because there are so many tax deductions that they can write off with their self-employment when they own their own business. A lot of times there's some hidden income in there. So if you're a party who's trying to get support from that person, for example, child support, they may actually bring home a lot more money than they're claiming.
Certainly, and those need to be reviewed and addressed as well, so that the proper treatment is done and everybody gets the fair shake. Number 19 on my list, and the final one is, of course, and we've addressed this earlier, but understand that when you go into this settlement, that child support's not going to be tax deductible, but alimony is. Oftentimes, even to this day, I still have clients that come in, and I said, well, I've paid child support, I can deduct that, right? And I said, well, no, I'm sorry, you can't.
Right.
And then you have to explain that to them, the differences between alimony and child support.
Yeah, and that's important to keep in mind when you're structuring a settlement, because sometimes the settlement options might include a little more in the alimony payment and a little less in the child support, and that might be more favorable than taking a settlement with a little more in the child support and a little less in the alimony. Mm-hmm. All right, let's go back and do a couple of questions that we pulled off of the website. We have one here in which this person is going through a divorce, or his wife and he are discussing divorce, and they plan to file soon. He's wanting to know, again, some tips to keep himself from being financially devastated while still being sure that he's taking care of the kids. Do you want to kind of talk about that just a little bit?
Certainly, and if you'll excuse me, I'll use a kind of a sports metaphor to explain. I think it's a really good question, and it's very responsible of this individual to think beforehand to make sure that they're planning for this eventuality. So how can you best prepare for the financial changes? Well, let's try looking at it this way. Your attorney is your quarterback. Make sure that your attorney is experienced in the field of divorce and family law. And, of course, the quarterback is not the entire team. So in addition to the quarterback, you need to coordinate with your accountant, insurance professional, financial advisor, and your banker. And based on your circumstances, there may be other advisors you need to include in this loop. Divorce isn't a game many of us want to be in or plan to be in, but it happens. Your legal financial team can help coach you through. Nobody ever really wins in these situations. The objective is through sound planning to keep yourself on the scoreboard. Keep your team involved with issues that arise and obtain their advice and counsel. Of even more importance, keep your attorney informed of the advice you are getting from your team so that he or she can call the right plays on your behalf. No doubt there will be lifestyle changes due to the alimony and child support obligations, and of course the non-combining of financial resources. Get an idea as soon as you are able as to what your financial obligations will be due to the divorce. Sit down with the team of your financial advisor and or your accountant to make a plan so that you can live within, what will be basically your new budget.
Right. And the thing to sort of keep in mind is you've been living with a combined income. Presumably your wife works as well. You've been living with a combined income of yourself and your wife, and now your combined income now has to support two households. And particularly with the child support calculation, that's the way they look at it, is this is the combined income, and now now it's been split apart, but you still have this obligation for the kids. And unfortunately, it leaves a lot of people feeling like they don't have as much money as before, and it's because the money that you do have is stretched a lot thinner, unfortunately. And the best way to I think proactively go about that is to be sure that everybody involved has all the information and knows exactly what your expenses are. If there are any sort of extraordinary expenses that you incur for the kids, any kind of special tuition payments if they're in private school, any sort of health issues that they may have. It's very important that all of that be out on the table so that the correct child support amount can be entered, and any correct support obligation, any obligation to your ex-spouse as well would be entered. But without the information about your expenses, nobody knows exactly what you pay, so they're just operating on your gross income.
Yes, certainly.
Okay. Well, Michael, we are about out of time for this evening. Yeah, we've time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, it sure does.
Right. Okay. Well, those the 19 rules that you gave us were extremely helpful, and I think will help give our listeners a good idea of what they need to be preparing for when they're going into a divorce. So, we thank you for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me, and I was glad and happy to do it.
All right. And you have a good evening.
You too.
And everyone else out there, please have a good evening as well, and join us again next week for another edition of DasDivorceLive.com.